Next on Unsolved Mysteries, a reclusive millionaire vanishes. Then, years later, her skull is found in a septic tank on her own property. Who murdered Camila Lyman? A radio reporter's life is threatened and his home is vandalized after he goes public with a story about UFOs. A mother's dying wish is that her two children, separated by war, will be reunited. 3-day-old Marlene Santana is taken from her mother's arms at gunpoint. She is still missing.
5 compelling cases, some just waiting to be solved, and maybe you hold the key. I'm Dennis Farina, and this is Unsolved Mysteries.
Hopkinton, Rhode Island. Dog breeder Greg Siner is cleaning out the kennels of his new estate when he makes a shocking discovery.
I was hosing down the kennel and I smelt a foul odor and thought that maybe the septic system wasn't working properly. I decided to look inside to see if it needed to be pumped. And when I did, there was a skull staring straight back up at me. Once I saw the bottom jaw, I realized it was human and just knew that this was Camila.
Dental records confirmed that it was indeed the skull of Camila Lyman, the estate's previous owner. She had mysteriously vanished 10 years earlier. This missing persons case was now a murder investigation. However, the clues would not be found in the bizarre nature of her death, but in the strange and mysterious nature of Camila's life.
Camila Lyman was the daughter of old money Boston aristocrats. Camila shared her father's passion for show dogs, and he soon discovered that his youngest daughter had quite a gift.
In the dog world, she was very successful. She was a good handler, and she was a good breeder, and she showed her dogs extremely well. She was very proficient.
Camila never dated and never married. Her dogs were her life. She lived with her parents on their 100-acre estate. But when they died, the life Camila knew was over. 40 years old and alone, her behavior became more and more bizarre.
Babies, my sweeties.
Camila became a recluse. She spent more time with her dogs than she did with people. Her appearance also began to change. She bought animal steroids and then took them herself. Her voice deepened, she developed facial hair, and she began wearing men's clothing. Camila basically transformed herself into a middle-aged man.
My sister in California called me up and said, "Hey, Camila's on the TV dressed as a man. What do you think?" And I said, "Well, I'd heard that she did sometimes do that."
In this rare video, Camila is dressed as a woman. But 7 years later, she legally changed her name to Cam Lyman and was dressing as a man.
It was shocking in a way and very surprising. But because of your respect for people's privacy, unless Camila wished to explain why she was doing this, we didn't ask any questions about it. We just accepted it the way it was.
I remember people talking about Camila and the changing of her clothing and her appearance. But you have to remember, you are at dog shows. You're judging dogs, not people. I think Camila felt very comfortable amongst her dog friends.
Cam isolated herself from her family and became close friends with fellow dog lover George O'Neill.
George O'Neill became the sole confidant, advisor, accountant, and representative of Camila.
Cam, we don't have the money to do this right now.
He took care of paying her bills. He took care of arranging for her to get to dog shows, and many times getting her to the shows. He was a friend who she socialized with and had great confidence in his abilities to help her conduct her affairs.
Let's go, in the car.
As George O'Neill took over more and more duties and chores for Camila, he became her sole confidant. She associated with no one other than George O'Neill. Camila became more and more eccentric. She would often carry a briefcase with hundreds of thousands of dollars and large amounts of jewelry in it. She would go out to the store and have $10,000 in her pocket to buy a quart of milk.
No, I don't know what to think. I really don't know, because she is...
One Christmas, Camilla's friends didn't receive their usual Christmas card. No one had heard from her in months. Concerned, the family hired a private investigator named Charles Allen.
They were very concerned because checks that had been sent to Camila had, rather than being endorsed with her signature, were being endorsed with an account number of a bank account in Rhode Island.
Allen was surprised to discover that George O'Neill had been depositing Camilla's trust fund checks into his own bank account. Even more alarming was that he also held Camilla's power of attorney and was Camilla's sole beneficiary. He stood to inherit her entire estate.
Mr. O'Neill, my name is Charles Allen. I'm here to inquire about Camila Lyman.
I haven't seen her.
Mr. O'Neill did not express any concern for her safety. He felt that she had done this before and that she had just gone off on a trip.
I understand all of that.
O'Neill claimed he had last spoken with Camila a full year earlier. He said that she had hung up on him during an argument on the phone.
He told me that on the following day, he went to Camila's house and found the telephone ripped out of the wall, and found no sign of Camila, and found her dogs unattended, unfed, and found the kennel somewhat in disarray.
Camila!
Mr. O'Neill indicated that he felt that Camila may have gone off to Europe to have a sex change operation.
Camila had been missing for over a year, but no police report was filed and no one in the family was notified. Yet O'Neill continued to cash Camila's checks.
I found it very hard to believe that a woman who didn't like going to the dentist, who didn't like going to the doctor, would go off to Europe and have a sex change operation. This woman didn't like leaving her home.
Here in the main kennel, we have room for 50 dogs. I think we have...
George O'Neill even hired full-time caretakers for Camila's dog kennels and began showing her champion spaniel as his own.
Camila was no longer around, but the dog was still out there being campaigned, and he was now campaigned under the ownership of George and June O'Neill.
Charles Allen claims that much of Camila's $4 million estate, her bank account, and family treasures simply disappeared.
We're talking about between $3 and $5 million here, and its whereabouts are unknown at this time.
And then there was the question of Camila's beloved dogs.
When I first heard George O'Neill's story, I absolutely never crossed my mind that it was a true story, because she never, ever would have left her dogs. It was totally out of character.
Any chance that we could maybe go over and get on the property, maybe take a look around?
She's not there, I'm telling you.
On a number of occasions, I wanted to search the property, and this search would have certainly included the septic system, but George O'Neill would not allow it.
About 7 years after she disappeared, Cam Lyman was declared legally dead. 3 years later, her body was found in the septic tank. She had been shot and her skull had been fractured.
The fact that we could bury Camila and physically put an end to her life in a peaceful way was a wonderful sense of closure for us. On the other hand, there's still more that we need to pursue. We need to bring the person who committed this unbelievable crime to justice.
Update. 16 years after Camila Lyman disappeared, a grand jury indicted George O'Neill on the charge of embezzling $15,000 from her trust. After a plea bargain, he was sentenced to just 1 year of probation and fined only $450 in court costs. When O'Neill was recently asked about Camila, he said, quote, "She's dead? I don't know anything about it." Next, when a reporter investigates UFO sightings in his small town, he gets more than he bargained for.
We have broadcast a number of stories about UFOs, and now we have another to add to that list. But this one is different. It involves a robbery, late-night phone calls, and even death threats.
Wytheville, Virginia. It's a small town nestled in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains. Country music station WYVE calls itself the voice of Wytheville. On most days, life here is usually quiet and uneventful. But that was not the case one October morning.
Morning, Sheriff. Danny Gordon.
Radio reporter Danny Gordon checked in as usual. What he heard was not usual at all. He heard an unbelievable story.
Over near, Austinville? Huh? Right. Got anything else? You're kidding me.
3 sheriff's deputies, all former military men, claimed that they had seen a UFO.
When was that?
Okay, Danny, you're on in 3, 2, 1.
Unidentified flying objects have been sighted over Wythe County on Monday and Tuesday evenings. The Wythe County Sheriff...
It was a filler piece that came on at the end of the news, which I usually relegate to something that's maybe unusual, like we had one police officer who killed 5 chickens once with 2 shots, and that was a story that ran as kind of a ha-ha piece. And this was another ha-ha piece, and being a very skeptical newsman, it was definitely not in my lead part of my news.
Danny's ha-ha piece caused some unbelievable listener responses. Reports of UFO sightings poured into the station. So Danny set up a special call-in program for the following week.
Hello, this is Danny Gordon. You're on the air. Go ahead, please.
These are the exact words of some of those calls.
Where'd you see this?
Well, it kind of looks something about like an egg shape to me.
What we could see was red, green, and white, sort of flashing lights. We saw a plane go by with, red flashing lights. We knew it wasn't a jet of any sort.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. Thanks a lot.
Being a brass tacks journalist, I always believe there is a plausible, logical explanation. And I felt at that time that it was military of some nature and that we would find the reason in a short period of time.
Danny thought the UFOs were most likely experimental aircraft being tested at a nearby Air Force base. But he was repeatedly told by the military that there was no testing going on. More and more residents came forward with their stories of UFOs, and then the military finally came up with an explanation.
Everybody had been telling us that what people were seeing were planes refueling. And so I said, well, I didn't know that's how they did that. And then I thought, well, why are they doing that down over my house? Isn't this something they should be doing away from populated areas?
I called the Pentagon and talked to the Air Force general there, who told me if they were refueling under 13,000 feet, then somebody's butt's in a sling. And to this day, we don't know if they were refueling at 5,000 feet. But at the same time, I have asked, if it is military, then I'll back off the story and leave it alone if you tell me, because I'm a patriot. And each time I'm told it's not us, we're not doing it, and we haven't been doing it.
Just 2 weeks after the first sighting, Danny and his friend, Roger Hall, drove to the area where most of the sightings had occurred. They brought along a 35mm camera and a video camera.
We were headed home after 2 hours of fruitless searching, about 8:45 on Route 21 South coming into Wytheville, and just happened to look to my left and saw a very unusual object coming across the horizon.
What's that?
What?
Over there, some lights or something. I'm gonna pull over.
I pulled off to the side of the road in a hurry, jumped out. He got out of the right side, and as he got out, I noticed the craft was coming at me, was very large. It had a dome shape to the top of it, had no wings, and had what appeared to be a strobe putting out multicolored lights on the right side of the craft.
What the hell is that?
I don't know.
It was probably less than 1,000 feet away and 1,000 feet high at the maximum. We guessed it being at least 2 football fields in diameter. You could see 3 huge, looked like picture windows in the back of it that were lit from the inside out.
As I watched the sky, from the left came a red ball. As the big mothership went into a small skiff of clouds, the red ball docked with the craft. It was like you were watching a computer game and watching these things develop on the video screen.
Did you get a picture of that?
No, didn't you?
There's a camera on the trunk.
We looked at each other and realized no pictures. The camera was not in my hand, the camera was not in his hand, and we both knew we blew it.
The only thing I can say is we were just awestruck by it or just dumb, whichever one. I'm not sure which, but we sure didn't get any pictures of it.
The next night, the two went out again. This time, they did get photographs. With the film still undeveloped, a press conference was called the next day.
The night before the press conference, I received a phone call from somebody who refused to identify themselves, and they said that I needed to be aware that the CIA and the federal government were very much interested in with kind of UFOs. I started to wonder what I had stepped into, and my wife was urging me to back off, to leave it alone, and I also was receiving some anonymous phone calls saying, you know, it's something you need to leave it alone because it's not for your place to be messing in defense matters.
Becky?
Then, after the press conference, Danny discovered that someone had broken into his house.
Becky?
Strangely, nothing was stolen, but Danny was convinced that someone was looking for his photographs. But when they were developed, they revealed only vague streaks of light in the sky. Next, Danny gets another chance to photograph the UFO, and this time, he captures some amazing images. They were not just 1 or 2 isolated sightings. Hundreds of people reported seeing UFOs in the sky above Wytheville, Virginia. One of those was radio journalist Danny Gordon, and he was about to get evidence to prove it. About 6 weeks after his press conference, Danny and his wife and daughter were leaving the local mall when yet another UFO appeared.
We looked very quickly and saw what I thought was one large object, which later appeared to be 4 flying dish shapes. As soon as the objects were photographed, they disappeared from view. When the pictures came out, they had a lot of grain, but they showed definite 4 shapes of objects in the sky. But the most impressive point in the 4 photographs, the objects appear to change shape or light formations within 1 click of the camera. They go from a teardrop shape to a round ball shape, then they go to a flying saucer-like dish shape, and then they go to the edge shape as they go out of sight.
Clearly, something extraordinary was happening in this small town. Within a 3-month period, there had been more than 1,500 sightings. One of the first occurred here, a mile from downtown. Eyewitnesses said the craft resembled a brightly lit spinning carousel. Immediately, other sightings were reported.
I'm not mistaken about what we saw. Absolutely not, because we'd never seen this before.
Patricia Aker had 10 sightings, all of them here, 8 miles north of town.
The best way I could describe them is that they sort of look like a cross between a helicopter and an airplane with no noise.
And then there was Mary Jane Williamson's sighting, which happened directly above her house in the center of Wytheville.
It had all the white lights in the front, just a big semicircle of white lights, and it was just huge. I mean, it was just absolutely huge. You just had this feeling of something really, really big just moving, just drifting over your head, and no sound or anything.
Eventually, I got around to calling the Pentagon and talked with the spokesman for defense of the Pentagon, and he speaks for all the defense branches, and he told me, quote, twice, "We do not deny UFOs exist. The government confirms they exist, but we deny they pose a threat to the populace of Wythe County." And my question was, how do you know this? And he said, I can't tell you, but there's no threat to you, so that's the reason we're not sending convoys of aircraft down there to protect Wythe County.
3 months later, Danny was packing for a broadcasters conference in Virginia Beach, where he was to talk about his UFO coverage.
I received a phone call at home from a retired military intelligence officer, and first he told me to make sure that I taped the conversation so he could put the date and everyone to be aware. And I said, why do you want to tape this? And he said, I want your friends to know if something happens to you that I forewarned you.
What I'm telling you, Danny, is I've been pursuing this thing for many, many years. And like I say, I saw my son die of leukemia.
He told me that because of his investigations into the UFO field, that they had hit his son and caused his son to die with some kind of virus connected to leukemia.
Danny, who is it?
It's nothing.
He said that he had information the federal government was not very happy with my UFO investigations, and they felt like I was too loud of a voice to quieten by just killing me, which made me very happy. And he said they want to quieten you in a different fashion.
What I'm telling you, they will try to hit you if they think it's practical for their purposes to keep you from further investigating this thing, and then most likely it'll be done through skin contact chemicals. It could be something on the doorknob of your car or on the steering wheel. They could also come up with something, do something to your children.
You know, it's one thing for someone to threaten myself. When you threaten my family, you're treading on very thin water.
Well, I'm going to Virginia Beach.
How many times you think I'm some kind of crackpot?
No, I appreciate it. I appreciate that. Thank you for calling.
What was that about?
Oh, nothing, honey.
Oddly enough, it was the same weekend that there was a hepatitis epidemic in Virginia Beach. Had I come down with hepatitis, I would have believed, and everyone would have believed they had gotten to me. But I came back with no problems, and the children were in good shape.
Less than 1 month later, Danny had 2 surprise visitors at his house.
Great, my name's Don. It's my associate Michael, reporter with the Richmond Gazette. I'd like to ask you a few questions, if you don't mind, about these recent UFO sightings.
No, that'd be fine. That'd be fine.
Okay, great.
They stayed for about 45 minutes, one interviewing Danny and the other walking around the house taking pictures.
They had told me when they left they would send me a copy of the article so I could peruse it. And when I didn't receive one, I called the newspaper and they said, well, these 2 guys are not on our payroll. They don't work for us. So who they were, I don't know, but they were in my house, saw my pictures, saw my negatives, talked to my family, took pictures, and then left, but they were not with the newspaper.
A few weeks later, Danny sat down to organize his UFO photographs.
And when I got to the canister which had the UFO negatives, I quickly opened it up and found some UFO negatives, but the one negative with the shots from the shopping mall was missing. I felt like maybe there was something in those photographs that I was not seeing. So I took the photographs to some other people to look at. We used magnifying glasses, we measured angles, trying to find out why these photographs were so important. And we've yet to discover why anyone would want to steal that one Pacific set of 4 in a series of photographs of the UFOs.
2 months later, the stress of late-night phone calls, the home break-in, the strange visitors, and now the missing negatives finally took its toll on Danny.
He just keeled over. He was getting ready for work.
Later, doctors determined that the heart attack was brought on not by heart problems, but by severe exhaustion. Danny was warned that continued involvement with the UFO controversy could kill him.
If I had my choice, I'd not report the UFO story again. It's just been too hard on my life and created too many problems. Don't look up. Because once you look up and you tell somebody what you saw, your life is changed forever.
Danny Gordon says Wytheville has moved on from its days as a UFO town and is now enjoying its booming arts and business communities. But if history tells us anything, sometime soon in another small town, someone else will look up and his or her life will be changed forever.
Next, a wealthy recluse destroys all traces of her past. She remains as mysterious in death as she was in life. On a dreary January day in a tiny English village, a mysterious woman was laid to rest.
Heavenly Father, we commit the body of our dear sister Dorothea to be consumed by fire.
It was rumored that Dorothea Allen, the wealthiest person in the county, had once danced with Fred Astaire and dined with Gary Cooper. But when she died at the age of 89, only 5 people came to her funeral. In her day, Dorothea was considered beautiful. Everyone agreed she was a devoted wife to her husband Robert until his death. The couple had no children, and when Dorothea died, she left no will. Only a complicated mystery.
When the day of judgment.
Dorothea Allen was a study in contrast. On one hand, she was a wealthy executive who partied with movie stars. But on the other, she hoarded her millions and mistreated those who worked for her. And no one knows why. In her final days, Dorothea did everything that she could to erase her past.
After Dorothea's death, the British government asked investigators to search her estate in an effort to identify her heirs.
We found her passport, which had pages ripped from it. And of course, these are the pages that gave us all the information we might have needed. We looked through photograph albums, and all the pictures had been pulled out of the albums, and someone had taken a pair of scissors to them and cut off the heads, and so we couldn't identify anyone.
Dorothea and her husband, Robert, were intensely private. They kept their background secret, even from their closest friends. The Allens made their fortune manufacturing fancy corsets for women. The frilly undergarments were a huge hit, and Dorothea oversaw every detail of their production.
She had an eye for beauty, and she certainly used it. Yeah, she made that factory a great success. She was an absolute perfectionist. She would count the stitches to the inch on everything that was done.
It should be 12 stitches to the inch. You've only done 11.
Dorothea was a very nasty piece of work. She ran her servants ragged, from what I can gather. I also think she didn't pay very well to her employees and ran quite a strict regime. She demanded people walk out of her office backwards.
At Christmas, the Allens always had a party, but invited only those employees who had done an outstanding job. And only a select few were actually allowed to even speak to the Allens.
He used to sit right at the end of the room, you know, behind a little rope. And people used to go up and talk to them. They used to be like royalty, really, sort of surveying all before them.
Robert died after a long illness. Because Dorothea's whole life was built around her business and her husband, she fell to pieces.
Oh, she was very, very upset. They absolutely thought the world of one another. And she was very much affected. After the death of Mr. Allen, one of her habits was to get his cigars and light them and leave them burning in the hall and in the library, so that she got the atmosphere of him still being there.
Dorothea began to neglect her business, and the American parent company finally forced her out. She spent more and more time alone. After an accident in her Rolls-Royce, Dorothea never left her estate again.
No one was allowed in there, and she lived with a gardener and a housekeeper in one room in the kitchen.
As her health began to fail, Dorothea became obsessed with eliminating her past. She mutilated family photos and destroyed the passport page that listed her place and date of birth. Then, one cold, wintry day, Dorothea Allen died in bed. She had been a recluse for more than 20 years and had adamantly refused to write a will.
Well, she told some people that she thought people had too much money anyway, and therefore they didn't need to be left money in a will. But then she would have known that the state would come in and take the money, and I wouldn't have thought anyone would want to leave money to the government. So she had to have something to hide, and she mistakenly thought that by not leaving a will, she would be able to disguise her life after she died.
There appeared to be no record of where or when Dorothea Allen was born, or even what her maiden name was. And then, a smallpox vaccination certificate surfaced. On it, Dorothea's birth date was listed as January 21st, 1901, and her last name was Farquharson. Finally, there seemed to be some clue to Dorothea's true identity.
She told me her name was Farquharson, and several times she told me that, and that she was born in Scotland.
Well, I'd like to know where the name Farquharson comes from. I think that this is some red herring that's been put forward fairly early on. There is no Dorothea Farquharson that fits in, either 10 years either side of the alleged date of birth.
My own personal theory is that Dorothea was a woman of lowly birth, that she was a seamstress or perhaps a barmaid. If it is true that she did come from humble background, then I think it's probably something she would want to keep quiet.
I think the true story is that she met in the 1920s Robert Langwell Allen in the north of England. He was married, and I think they fell in love. He left his wife and child and set up home with Dorothea Allen. They then had to carry on the charade of being a married couple. And as she got older, she became more convinced that the infidelity would come out and wanted more and more to protect it.
There are theories that Robert and Dorothea were brother and sister. That is something you want to keep very quiet, because obviously incest is punishable by law.
So, who was this mystery woman? Clearly, she wanted her identity to remain a secret, and it seems as though she nearly got away with it. Update. 6 years after Dorothea's death, a wartime pilot recognized her in a newspaper photo and identified her as his childhood sweetheart, Dora Brammer. It was learned that she was the daughter of a steel worker and had built her corset business with money her father made in real estate. After analyzing a single gray hair that was taken from the elegant hairbrush left at her manor, investigators found more than 70 of her relatives. Each received roughly $40,000 from her estate. And finally, it was learned that Dorothea and her husband Robert were never legally married because Robert had failed to divorce his first wife. Next, after more than 40 years, a woman is reunited with her long-lost brother. Thanks to you. We recently told you the story about a brother and a sister who were separated right after World War II. It involved a search that spanned 2 continents, 2 generations, and almost half a century.
But you know, I don't want you should get sick.
Helena Karowski helped her 5-year-old son prepare for a long journey. Christopher was going to the United States, but with another family.
I'll miss you, Mama.
I'll miss you too, Christopher.
My mother didn't really want to send him with somebody else, but my father kept saying, you know, education, he's going to get a good education, he's going to be able to start school, so it was easier for him. But my mother, I guess being a woman, it just tore at her heart.
It was only 7 years after World War II, and refugees like Helena and her husband Apollonary desperately wanted a better life. In America, Christopher would live with friends until the Karowskis and their daughter Michelle could follow. A few months later, however, Christopher's family decided to stay in England. They wrote to their friends in the U.S. and asked them to send Christopher home.
Helena! Yeah? I've received letter from America. America? Yes, they don't send Christopher back. What? They don't send Christopher back. They say he's better off in America.
The family tried everything they could think of to get Christopher back, but there was nothing they could do. The Kurowskis never saw their son again. Christopher's parents died in England. His sister Michelle moved to America. Their mother's dying wish was that Christopher and Michelle would someday be reunited.
I want to be able to tell him how much my mother loved him, how she never forgot him, how to the day she died, that she loved him.
Update. When we aired this story, Christopher's adoptive sister, Rose Ruker, was watching. She told him, and he contacted us. A short time later, Christopher was on his way to Michelle's home outside of Houston.
As I was waiting for Christopher to come and I was looking out the window, I was wanting my mum to be here and wishing that she was here because she had dreamed of this.
Hi. It's been a long time. You did it.
I can't believe this.
I really can't describe how I felt. I can't describe it. It's too much for words. All these years wondering, hoping, and it's finally come true.
Christopher introduced his wife, Ellen, and then met Michelle's husband, daughter, and granddaughters.
This is my granddaughter, Kaylee, right here.
Kaylee?
Your granddaughter, too. I'm just happy. I'm happy that I have him now. It's just so hard to describe. Something I've dreamt about, God, for 30-odd years, and it's here. It's still. I keep looking at him because I can't believe it's actually happened.
Now that her daughter and son have been reunited, Helena's dying wish has finally been granted. After decades apart, Christopher and Michelle have a lot of catching up to do, and they're already well on their way.
Brooklyn, New York. Every October 18th, Francesca and Tomas Santana commemorate their daughter Marlene's birthday. But October 18th is also a time of sorrow. Marlene was abducted when she was only 3 days old and has been missing ever since. But in the beginning, all that really mattered was having a beautiful, healthy baby.
When my baby was born, she was pretty. She was very beautiful. She was the most beautiful baby in the nursery.
3 days later, on the 21st of October, Francesca was preparing to take her baby home when she met a woman outside the nursery.
Is that your baby?
Yeah.
He's so beautiful.
Thank you. When I was looking at my baby in the nursery, I saw a woman in the window that she told me that my baby was the most quiet one, the prettiest one. And I was glad that she told me that because I thought she liked my baby.
A few hours later, at 9 p.m., Francesca checked out of the hospital. Her two sisters-in-law came to take her home.
When we going downstairs, a woman came to me, the same woman that I saw in the nursery.
Where are you going?
She told me she was waiting for me all day.
We're going home now. Goodbye. This isn't a game. I'm not joking around. Walk or I'll blow her head off. Walk.
So she showed us the gun and she told us to walk or she gonna blow up the head. And we walk.
Keep going.
They walked over 6 blocks at gunpoint.
Walk!
Finally, They stopped near a deserted junkyard.
Stop! I said stop!
At first, Francesca thought they were being robbed.
Give me the baby. I said give me the baby. Keep walking. Walk!
The woman got in a car driven by an accomplice and drove off.
When she took the baby, I was in shock. I didn't know what to do. I was crying. I stopped the car there, and nobody helped us.
Francesca went to the police, and detectives were assigned to the case. She was able to describe the car that had driven away with Marlene. It was a white 1976 Chevy Malibu with red lettering on its door. At the hospital, police tried to get a description of the mysterious woman. Some believe that she was not a professional criminal, but rather an emotionally unstable woman unable to have a child of her own. This composite of the abductor is based on eyewitness descriptions. She is white with Hispanic features and has no accent. Her hair was dyed reddish blonde, and at the time, she appeared to be in her late 20s. Today, the Santana family is still searching for their missing daughter. An artist sketched this composite of what Marlene Santana would look like when she was a child. She has brown hair and brown eyes. This is a composite of how she might look as a young woman. Marlene was born with a medical condition that makes her feet appear somewhat C-shaped when viewed from the bottom. She may celebrate her birthday around Halloween, and she may have been put up for an illegal adoption in late 1985 or 1986.
Maybe one day, a person who knows where's my baby, they must say something, they must do it. I don't think I could die without seeing my baby again.
If you have any information about Marlene's disappearance or whereabouts, please log on to our website at Unsolved.